In June of 2022, with support from the Columbia Global Center in Chile, I traveled to Venice to participate in an international assembly of peatland scientists, artists, and activists. Our goal was to create and sign an international agreement for the protection of peatlands. Peatlands cover between 3 and 4% of the Earth's surface, but they hold nearly 1/3 of the carbon in the planet's soil. They're formed over thousands of years from partially decomposed plant material that accumulates at the rate of 0.5 to 1 millimeter per year. Sphagnum moss plays an essential role in regulating water levels and slowing the decomposition of plant matter. The flora and fauna found in the acidic, low-oxygen environment of peatlands includes carnivorous plants, aquatic insects, and a variety of birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. So, peatlands play essential roles in supporting biodiversity and protecting the planet from climate change, decreasing flood risk, and purifying water. Human communities have always lived side by side with peatlands, but while First Nation communities tend to engage with them in sustainable ways, Western societies have a tendency to either treat peatlands as useless ecosystems to be repurposed, or they develop extractive, unsustainable relationships with them. Drainage and extraction for horticulture, forestry, and energy releases the vast carbon stores of peatlands into the atmosphere. The Venice Agreement Assembly was planned to respond creatively and pragmatically to the threats peatlands face. It was designed to bridge local, regional, and global concerns. Its organization resulted from a decade-long process initiated by Ensayos, a nomadic collective of artists, scientists, and environmental activists I've been involved with since 2015. Founded in 2010 by Chilean curator Camila Marambio, Ensayos was initially devoted to hosting residencies in Tierra del Fuego, which built community among individuals from disparate disciplines interested in understanding the human geography and ecology of the archipelago. Our work always evolved with an eye to what the region could teach us about environmental and human dynamics in the rest of the world. I joined Ensayos in 2015 when I was invited to use my ethnographic and social network tools to build up participatory sculpture based on analysis of their first 5 years of work. For me, this project opened a window onto the links between art and environmental advocacy. More importantly, it led me to use sociology in a new way, linking my research to creative writing, performance, biosculpture, and olfactory art. By 2015, the group had developed a project on the invasive and damaging presence of beavers in Patagonia. Ensayos members were also developing a television series, La Distancia, on human geography, the state, and the environment, which debuted in 2018. In 2020, we held a 3-month residency at the New Museum in New York City, where we rewrote Fefu and Her Friends, a play by Maria Irene Fornés, to reflect on ecofeminism and peatlands in Tierra del Fuego. The resulting play, Cuckoo and Her Fishes, presented a network of women, our alter egos, connected through friendship and professional ties, coming together to organize around peatland protection. The Cuckoo project involved a multinational group of artists and activists, including the ecologist Bárbara Saavedra, who directs the Wildlife Conservation Society in Chile, and Gemani Molina, a leader of the Selk'nam community, which has existed in Tierra del Fuego since long before colonization. Their perspectives helped us to recognize how ecology and culture are interwoven. The new museum residency paved the way for our involvement with peatland protection and stewardship. In June of 2021, during the second binational peatland seminar between Chile and Argentina, Ensayos participated in the establishment of the Patagonian Peatland Initiative, and the curatorial project Turba Tol Hol-Hol Tol, meaning Heart of the Peatlands in Selk'nam, began evolving. The project was selected to represent Chile at the 59th Venice Biennale from April to November of 2022. It involved installing a peatbog in a stone warehouse. A raised path led through the peatbog to a circular screen. The film projected on it plunged viewers into the Fuegian peatland, down in space and back in time through ancient layers of peat. Then it pulled them up to ground level amid a round of dancers chanting in the Selk'nam language. The installation created a connection between visitors and peatlands through sound, touch, smell, and image. It also relayed pressing concerns about peatbog preservation. By bringing in the historical relationship between the peatbog and Selk'nam people, it evoked alternative forms of coexistence between humans and their environment. While developing Turba Tol, we realized that the Biennale offered an ideal venue for hosting an international assembly of peatland protectors. The goal of the assembly would be to write an agreement for peatland protection. But unlike international agreements, such as those developed at United Nations and NGO-sponsored meetings, this one would both serve as a tool for local mobilization and interweave communities across the globe by forging horizontal ties of support and collaboration. Over the years, the work of Ensayos has become increasingly participatory, aiming to shift perceptions about human-nature relationships and incite individuals to change behaviors, question policies, and mobilize. The Venice Agreement takes this work a step further, with artists reaching beyond the art world to create new spaces for civic engagement, policy interventions, and movement building. The assembly to create and sign the Venice Agreement was co-organized and sponsored by Ensayos, the Wildlife Conservation Society in Chile, the Michael Succo Foundation, and the Greifswald Meyer Center. TBA 21's Ocean Space hosted the group in its Venice headquarters. Every continent was represented among the participants, and the committees brought together members of First Nations, immigrants, people of different generations, ethnicities, religions, political perspectives, and disciplines. Each one of us had a different set of peatland experiences. For 2 days, we were immersed in communicative and negotiating techniques inspired by the movement and theater work of Augusto Boal, led by conservationist activist and facilitator Charo Lanao. The work required us to translate between forms of knowledge, technical languages, and cultures. We began with our common denominator, care for the peatlands, and together created a space for envisioning change and mapping out concrete steps for overcoming barriers to conservation. The road to agreement was rocky, with artists, scientists, and activists working through their differences to agree about shared needs and aspirations. The agreement is first of all a poetic manifesto expressing the sensory experience of the peatbog, our love and care for these ecosystems, and their environmental and cultural value, including emotional and spiritual connections. At the same time, the agreement is grounded in the concrete needs and practical challenges of protecting peatlands. It calls for environmental education and awareness based on different forms of knowledge, including legal, indigenous, scientific, and artistic knowledge. It advocates for dialogue across diverse populations and across generations. The agreement emphasizes the importance of linking the work of scientists, policymakers, and those living from and with peatlands. And the agreement calls for policies that are dynamic, grounded in local knowledge, and accessible. It calls for policies that facilitate commitment to conservation from public and private sectors, using imaginative approaches that move away from extraction, drainage, and damage. The agreement also recognizes nature as a foundation of culture. It values stories, past and present, as sources of knowledge about ways of living with, rather than at the expense of, peatlands. Our assembly did not conclude with the agreement. We used it as a springboard for new local and international projects, taking advantage of our newly forged network. 6 months later, in December of 2022, we reconvened to discuss our continuing work for peatland conservation. Participants described the ways in which the Venice Agreement and Assembly informed, supported, and incited their work. One Chilean participant built a network of scientists and community members to organize around peatland education and protection in her region. Visual artists incorporated the methods we used in Venice for building collaborative networks across disciplines. A Lithuanian peatland scientist organized local volunteers for mire conservation. Leaders of Repeat, a youth-led collective, brought children to peatlands in Ireland, organized Peatfest, an online peatland festival and celebration, and secured funding to continue their activities. Bárbara Saavedra of WCS Chile gave a TEDx talk on behalf of peatlands, in addition to her ongoing, tireless advocacy work. Diana Kopansky, who coordinates the Global Peatlands Initiative in the Freshwater, Land and Climate branch of the UN Environment Programme, created a virtual Venice Peatland Pavilion, which was displayed at COP27 in Egypt. She also included the Venice Agreement in the first comprehensive global peatlands assessment and brought our agreement to the attention of United Nations Environment Programme member states. And this is a small sample of the work that followed our assembly. Those present at the post-agreement meeting expressed the empowering sense of community that still endures and the ways in which relationships that began in Venice continue to support their art and work on behalf of peatlands. In my own experience, participant observation and action research with Turba Tol Hol-Hol Tol, the Venice Agreement, and ensayos has transformed my traditional role as a social scientist into that of an active participant and transdisciplinary researcher. This role has allowed me to contribute to collective work, resulting not only in research but in artworks, advocacy, and activism on behalf of peatlands. I have learned that the impetus for social scientists to step beyond observation into involvement parallels the impulse for artists to engage with scientists, policymakers, and activists. Harnessing that impetus, this project exemplifies the interweaving of disciplines on behalf of a reality that is already interwoven, that of humans and non-humans, which, in this moment of crisis, calls for urgent recognition that human communities must learn together to coexist with other living and natural communities and environments.